It is Healthy and Whole Summit again, and how to live your best life now. Welcome to today's talk. My name is Melissa Adams, and I will be your host. So today's topic, we are talking to Dr. Brent Caplan, and he'll be talking to us about diet and autoimmunity. So just a bit about Dr. Caplan. Dr. Caplan is an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner and has successfully helped thousands of people all over the world regain their health and live more optimal and vibrant lives through his functional medicine coach. He's passionate about helping educate, inspire, and coach people with chronic conditions such as lupus and autoimmunity to achieve remission. Dr. Caplan is also the author of the international best-selling book, The Lupus Solution, and founder of Caplan Health Institute, a virtual health center providing educational resources, courses, and one-on-one coaching for people with lupus and autoimmunity who have the goal of achieving long-term remission. That is awesome. Welcome, Dr. Brent, to the summit.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. So why is it important to consider diet and nutrition for someone who has autoimmunity?
That's a great question. And, a lot of it comes down to food can be a trigger to really, set off autoimmunity. So, when we look at the immune response, it's important to look at a leaky gut. And so what leaky gut is it's basically intestinal permeability, where if we think of the gut as a mesh, when it's leaky, it just opens up and more things can get bypassed a layer that really shouldn't. Really, our nutrients should get in, our macro, micro, and phytonutrients, but things that shouldn't get through, like undigested proteins, toxins, start to get through and really trigger the immune response. So different things that can really lead to leaky gut. There's different stressors. We know cortisol, our stress hormone, is a trigger to leaky gut. They did a study with rats, and what they found was they just stressed these poor little rats out, and they found that alone caused these rats to develop leaky gut. Inflammatory foods can cause leaky gut. Gut infections, whether that's parasites, pathogenic bacteria, yeast overgrowth, viral loads, that can cause leaky gut. Excess alcohol consumption, medications, antibiotics even can cause leaky gut. So, if we have this and we're reacting to food, utilizing nutrition, can be really, really important. And we can use food as a tool in other aspects as well, of other autoimmune triggers. So we know for hormone imbalances can be a trigger to autoimmunity. When I say hormones, we can look at things like insulin, which can trigger flare, but also things like estrogen dominance. So first with insulin, in California, in my home state, we look at insulin, and our UCLA did a study, and they found 46% of Californians have insulin resistance or have prediabetes, and 9% have diabetes, meaning 55% of Californians have either prediabetes or diabetes or some sort of blood sugar dysregulation issue.
Sure.
And then on top of that, we know that we can catch insulin resistance, which precedes prediabetes, with some simple lab testing. So probably well over 55%. Such astronomical numbers. And we think of California in the States as a pretty healthful state, but those are really high numbers. And then getting into our sex hormones. When we have these high levels of insulin that can cause aromatization, which can overconvert our testosterone to estrogen. And we know estrogen dominance can be a trigger to autoimmunity. And that may be why autoimmunity is so common in women. And then in females, what it can do is it can increase testosterone, which can cause things like weight gain, cystic ovaries, unwanted hair growth, infertility. Some other things, reasons why food's important is, it can, poor food choices can lead to dysbiosis or abnormal bacteria. Um, whether that's not enough of the good stuff, too much of the bad stuff, just not normal. And this can come from inflammatory foods. Really restricted diets can cause this. So I know, there's some really popular diets that are out there, elimination diets that people are doing for long-term, keto diets. So this can actually decrease the diversity in your gut, which can then has been shown to have an aberrant effect on our immune system and can be an underlying trigger to autoimmunity. If we're getting pathogenic stuff in, so if we're traveling to places with, water that has some pathogens in it, eating foods that has, potential pathogens in it, or we're just not drinking or filtered water, there's potential for us to get some bad stuff in our gut. We also know these imbalances with what I call dysbiosis, abnormal gut bacteria, that can increase something called beta glucuronidase. And what this does is it can cause reabsorption of toxins. And we know toxic overload can trigger autoimmunity if we have that excess toxic burden. And this also can lead to, reabsorption of estrogen because it's not being, excreted out properly, with that being a trigger. So basically what happens with our detoxification, our liver turns our toxins from fat soluble to water soluble for excretion. It goes into our stool. And then in our gut, if we have this excess beta glucuronidase, what that can do is it can cause that fat soluble toxin to become water soluble again, so it can get reabsorbed, where that's estrogen is trying to be metabolized out, or other toxins. So speaking about toxic burdens with food, toxic burden can be a trigger if we're kind of exposed to all these toxins. So we can utilize food to help eliminate these toxins, whether it's cruciferous vegetables, which help metabolize hormones in a balanced way, thiols, which are in the allium family that provides nutrients like sulfur to help the liver detoxify better. Fibrous vegetables, fruits really provide the fiber for phase 3 detoxification, which is basically elimination. And it's also important for a healthy gut microbiome as well. There's also liver and kidney supporting vegetables, which really help with better bile flow and or kidney excretion. Things like artichokes, asparagus, beets, celery sprouts, leafy greens. So with this toxic burden, we really want to eliminate the toxins that we're exposed to, but then we want to also excrete it from our body properly. So I talked about foods that we can help us excrete it from our body, but then we want to limit the highly toxic foods, things like, fish with excess mercury. These are usually the larger fish, because those larger fish eat the smaller fish, who eat the smaller fish, who eat the smaller fish. And then you get the whole, all the mercury from, all that whole food chain. Unfiltered water, can be toxic. Some of us will say, okay, I'm drinking out of filtered water through a plastic water bottle. Now we can get exposed to all these, plastics that are in these, leaching from these water bottles. A lot of these water bottles are stored in facilities and factories that are not air conditioned, or being transported in non-air conditioned transports. So, we want to really limit our exposure to these toxins. Another big thing with food and autoimmunity is we want to decrease inflammation. So we want to avoid inflammatory foods, things like sugar, genetically modified organisms, GMO foods, fatty red meats, processed foods. So making sure we're not consuming too much of these. But then we want to take out the bad and again, bring in the good. So like foods with high omega-3 fatty acids are very anti-inflammatory. Things like salmon, fatty fish, flax, chia seeds, walnuts, phytonutrients, herbs, spices, colorful rainbow of different things can be really helpful. And with this, anti-inflammatory effects, a lot of individuals with autoimmune conditions also have pain as well. So it can be good for the autoimmune side, but it can also be good for the symptom of pain to really decrease that. And we need, inflammation drives leaky gut. So that can also be really healing for the gut. So making sure we have a good microbiome with the diversity of foods, decreasing inflammation, decreasing inflammatory triggers. We all have our basic needs of what we need, but if we have autoimmunity, we may have some higher needs for things like the omega-3s, the anti-inflammatory foods, things like vitamin D, phytonutrients. So, diet can play a big role in autoimmunity.
Yeah. So in terms of the diet, what is the best diet that you can recommend for autoimmunity?
That's a good question. So everyone is different, and different people have different triggers.
Yeah.
So I want to go over some of the basics and some of the major triggers and weaknesses that people see, so you can start to apply it from that standpoint. And some things that we see are like blood sugar. I mentioned insulin being a contributor. So some things that we can do if that's one of our weaknesses is start to eat a lower glycemic impact foods, avoid simple sugars, increase our fiber, which will slow down our sugar absorption to our bloodstream. And sugar is hard to get rid of because sugar is very, very addicting. They did a study, some more poor rats, where they had basically the option of sugar water is more controlled than I'm explaining, but sugar water and cocaine water. And these rats went after the sugar water over the cocaine water, showing sugar is more addicting to these rats than cocaine. So, sugar can be hard to, give up. I'll go over some tips and tricks in a bit to, ways to, try to give up that addiction. So if blood sugar is an issue or insulin, trying to address those things. And, I talked about the stats with California. Really, everyone should have their blood sugar tested because out of this 46% of individuals with prediabetes, 90% of them had no idea that they were prediabetic. And that could be driving autoimmunity. Then if we have a toxic burden or hormonal imbalance, let's say excess estrogen or estrogen dominance. Estrogen is actually metabolized throughout our body and detoxified. So if we're having these detox defects, we could really leverage some foods to just help us detoxify a bit better. And then also many times, as I mentioned, hormone imbalances may stem from, insulin driving food. So, looking at things from, an underlying standpoint, maybe it's her estrogen dominance or excess testosterone, but where is that actually coming from? And a really good place to start, for most people is just an elimination diet. So, an AIP type of diet, autoimmune paleo, combined with a low glycemic impact and a low toxic burden. So we're not, taking in a lot of these toxins, whether it's GMOs or, higher mercury fish and stuff like that. And what we'll do is, for more resources with this, we'll post this in our Facebook group, kind of a list. So, because I'm not going to be able to go over everything. And really with this elimination diet, I talked about restricting the diet for so long is not great because it limits our diversity. And if we're eating the same foods over and over and over again, and we have leaky gut and these food particles are getting exposed to our immune system, we can then start to develop these food sensitivities to the limited foods that we have. So really, when we look at a elimination type of diet or a really restricted diet, it's only meant for a short term. So really 1 month is all that's necessary. And some great things about doing it for 1 month is we can decrease cravings in 1 month. So if we can go 1 month without sugar, even if we're addicted to it, the cravings go away. It's amazing. But another reason why we do it for 1 month is how the immune system works. So when we have these food sensitivities, our body creates these immune memory proteins called antibodies. And they really differentiate friend or foe. And if there's foe, there's antibodies, created to these foods or, thought to be foe, even though it could be, like an undigested protein. And then our immune system attacks whatever kind of this memory we have to whatever protein. So let's say the protein is from casein, found in dairy, like casein protein. So the reason why we do it for a month, which I guess what I was getting to, is the half-life of some of these antibodies is between 21 to 23 days. And so we'll cut the antibody load in half. And then after we eliminate the foods for a month, we'll want to trial the food again and add it back in. And if we have an outward expression of a reaction, we know that we're sensitive to these foods. And something that's important to know is we may have a reaction to these foods that we didn't have before. And the reason why this is because since we decrease the antibody load in half, that ramp up of the antibodies, doubling of the antibodies, can cause that outward expression of symptoms. And although we may be having this immune reaction underneath the surface that's causing, these autoimmune issues, we may not outwardly be feeling it. Something else with the reintroduction, basically how we do the reintroduction is it can be a delayed onset response. So we just want to increase or trial one food at a time to see if we're reacting to it. So let's say we've taken out dairy. I talked about the casein before. Now we can add in, let's say, dairy. So we can add it in 2 to 3 times in a day. And the first time you add it in, you just want to add in a tiny bit just because in case you have a strong reaction to it. And then if you don't, you can try it, a bit more, a couple more times that day, and then wait 2 more days and see if you react to it. If you don't, that food is probably safe for you. And then you can try all the foods that are on the elimination list that we'll put up on our Facebook group. And then, something else with not restricting, staying on a restricted diet for so long, a lot of these restricted foods on these autoimmune elimination diets can be really healthful to us. They're just common reactions. Things like nightshades, peppers, eggplants, tomatoes. If you're not reacting to it, can be very healthful. Lectins, nuts and seeds is a common autoimmune trigger, but if you're not reacting to it, again, that can be helpful. Choline in eggs. Eggs are a common autoimmune trigger as well, but the choline can be really helpful. So, again, you don't want to stay too restricted of food too long. Just make sure you're introducing carefully. So, we want to take the bad stuff out, which I was just going over, find out what our triggers are. We want to get rid of the the inflammatory foods, but then we want to put the good stuff in. So a lot of this I would talk about before, the anti-inflammatory foods, omega-3s, having a rainbow of vegetables, getting some good diversity. This helps to expand our microbiome. We know with phytonutrients, different colors feed different bacteria. So the more colors we eat, the more diversity we'll have with our good bacteria. And we have a few pounds of good bacteria in our gut. We have more bacteria in our gut than we have cells in our body. And we have about 37 trillion cells in our bodies. It's pretty phenomenal. And also, eating a rainbow of vegetables is not just if you have autoimmunity. We know different colors can relate to heart health or eye health or skin health. So there's so many more health benefits than just helping with the gut diversity. We want to eat low glycemic fruits. Eat some healthy proteins, healthy fats. We know there's a lot of bad fats out there, things like trans fats, but there's also a lot of healthy fats. I think there's a fat myth. For a long time we thought really all fats were bad, but healthy fats can be really good for us. We want to make sure we're increasing a lot of herbs and spices, which can have a ton of phytonutrients in them. And again, diversity is so big. And when we eat a diversity, it decreases our chance of food sensitivity. Because I mentioned when we eat the same food over and over and over again, we have a higher risk of developing a sensitivity to that food. So when we rotate foods and we're not eating the same thing every day, it significantly decreases our chance of developing a food sensitivity. Yeah. And some other things with taking out the bad, we want to avoid our personal food triggers. So listen to your body. If you don't react well to a food, keep it out. Want to eat clean foods. If we can eat organic so we can get rid of the toxic burden, that's great. If you can't get everything organic, that's okay too. A good resource to pick and choose what foods are really going to be the best to buy organic or choose not to buy organic, go to EWG.org, stands for the Environmental Working Group, and they test pesticides on our fruits and vegetables. And how they test it is they wash it thoroughly, they take off the outer peel if it's not edible, and then they test it. And even with washing it and taking off the outer peel, it's not good enough with a lot of these fruits and vegetables. When pesticides are sprayed onto these plants, they can get into the soil and leach up from the roots of the vegetables. We want to avoid toxins, things like MSG, high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, heavy metals, and moderation. So this is important. We want to really create a lifelong nutritional approach. I don't like to use a D word, diet, too much, because that tends to, we think of that as a short-term approach. So what I was talking about before, like an elimination diet, AIP diet, I guess we could use that term. But afterwards, we really need to maintain things. So moderation tends to be key with a lot of these. If we do have a food sensitivity, most time we'll have to avoid that completely though. Although if we heal our guts and wait 3 to 6 months, a lot of these food sensitivities can actually go away. We can just retrial them and test them. I like to use the overflowing cup analogy when it comes to moderation. So there's some things which may not be great. Let's say we have, some high glycemic foods or a lot of simple sugars. We're eating a dessert. We can fill up, some water into the cup. And then let's say we have some toxins. We can fill up some water, a little bit of MSG. We can fill up some water. If we stay in moderation, the cup won't overflow. But if we're doing things in excess, our body can't handle that. And the cup can overflow. And that overflow is the autoimmune flare. And there's some things where, okay, that simple thing just dumps a bunch of water into the cup and it causes it to overflow, while other things, and we have to stay away from it completely, but other things we can do in moderation. as long as, our cup is not overflowing, and we can just do our best to avoid it as much as we can. So, most of us aren't going to avoid sugar,
Yeah,
completely forever.
yeah. Geez, Dr. Brent, you've given us a lot of information right now. Where is the best place that we can actually get additional support and this type of information? Because it is a lot to process and to take in at one time.
Yeah, so I'll try to go over this quickly. I'll go over some places where you can get support. I'll go over mindset a little bit as well. We have a mental and emotional connection to food. So food is comfort, food is a reward, food is social connection. Um, and I think one out of those three things is good. The social connection I really love. But food as comfort and food as a reward, sometimes that can get us into trouble. And if we can find other ways to bring in a comfort or reward, that may be a benefit for us. So, a great way to really change our mindset, we know food can be a major trigger to autoimmunity. It can be devastating to our bodies. Um, so I encourage you to stick with me for a moment and kind of go through this exercise. So let me ask you, if you were, or ask your audience, if you're given a delicious piece of your favorite food, and let's just say it's a piece of cake that you just love, but you were told that that cake had rat poison in it, would you eat it?
No.
And I'm not even going to answer
No.
for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, we all know the answer. But we know it's detrimental to your health, so you won't eat it. And here's the thing: if we have autoimmunity and food is a trigger, that can be detrimental to your health as well. When we're upregulating the immune response, that can cause tissue destruction. We need to start to change up our mindset. I think when we look at people and we see, oh, everyone else can do it, we feel like we can do it when we have autoimmunity, but we need to realize we're unique, we're different, and unique, we're unique in our good ways as well. So a mindset shift to a different type of reward, I think can be really, really important. So if we can use experiences as rewards, if we can use relationships as rewards, that can just help us kind of maintain this nutritional approach, so much more better. And it's important, especially if you have family, if you have kids, do this with the family. Um, you know, as a kid, anytime there's good grades, trip to go get some to the ice cream parlor. We won a baseball game. Okay, now it's a trip to the ice cream parlor as a reward. So instead, if we get good grades as kids, if we could reward things like a trip to the batting cages or a rock climbing gym or an arcade or a board game, or whatever is enjoyable for the kid or your family. And so I'm using kids as an example because I think it's important to incorporate this in the family so we can set healthy eating habits up for kids. But for ourselves, how can we use rewards? I think it's common for us to think, man, I had a rough week, I deserve this dessert. You do deserve something after a rough week, but what experience can you give to yourself and reward yourself with instead that can be empowering to you and healthful to you as well? So that's one mindset shift. Another thing is social pressure. And when it comes to autoimmunity, it's a lot of times a silent disease. You can't see it. So friends don't understand. But don't let friends' ignorance or even family ignorance or social pressure get in your way of health, because they don't see it. They're not dealing with it. They don't understand how these autoimmune triggers lead to tissue destruction in your body. So a couple tips and tricks of things they can do. Let's say you're going out to a social gathering, you can eat beforehand. When you get there, just let everyone know you're not hungry. And this is good for the person that just doesn't want to explain themselves and just doesn't want to deal with it. Still enjoy the experience of the social gathering. You just don't have to eat. Something that my wife and I like to do, we have kind of our own, food triggers. We'll bring an entree to eat, and we'll usually bring enough for really everyone to experience. And I love doing this because it's usually a really healthy entree, and we like to really expose other people and spread the word with healthy foods. So it's a good way to talk about health for us because we just like to get other people on board with healthy eating habits. So we love doing that. But things can be really hard to stick with. But some things that can make it easier with this mindset is when you start doing the right things, and maybe you can speak to this a bit in a second, but when you start to do the right things, you start to feel good, and it becomes so worthwhile. And there's a quote, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips. So that has more to do with, weight gain. But I like to just translate that quote to a moment on the lips, then leading to tissue autoimmune destruction. It's not great. I feel like that's a lot worse than weight gain. So don't give into a momentary pleasure for an autoimmune trigger. And then find alternatives to explore new foods and new favorites. So for some people, giving up gluten, which is a really common food sensitivity, they'll say, this gluten-free bread just doesn't taste the same. So, usually the substitute is never as good as the original, like, glutinous bread. Although, there's some good gluten-free bread substitutes. So instead of trying to find the substitute and alternative to things that you used to eat, sometimes it's good to explore, find new things, and find new satisfying foods that you do enjoy. And then finding support. So some great places for support: Facebook groups, finding like-minded people, a like-minded community can be so important because sometimes you feel like you're all alone, but there's so many people out there like you. We have a Facebook group. It's a private group inside our Caplan Health Institute Facebook group where we just try to create support for people and give resources. Find support from your family and friends. And another great way to stick with everything and follow through is create accountability with those around you. So this is something that I love to do. Let others know what you're going through if you're open to that. And it creates accountability for yourselves, and it creates understanding of others when they see, okay, you're making these lifestyle and nutritional changes. And also creates a support system. When you tell somebody, okay, I can't eat this food because it's destructive to my body, you don't want to be seen eating that food in front of them, because and then it shows that you can't follow through with what you're determined to do. Healthy lifestyle habits is good for everyone. Try to do it with the whole family. Get the whole family on board. Don't let friends and family sabotage you. We usually find a spouse is either your number one supporter or number one sabotager, and it's usually not on purpose. It's that they don't understand, so explain it to them, and create healthy habits early with your kids if you do have a family. Help them develop a diverse taste in different foods. When you're able to eat a diverse amount of foods, it makes any type of nutritional approach easy for you.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those tips. Tell me, Dr. Caplan, I know that there is a free gift regarding recipes that you'd like to share with the listeners. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we have a free gift. There's autoimmune friendly recipes. So the website to get that, I believe, is kaplanhealthinstitute.com/recipes. And it just goes over, some of the, a little bit of information about some nutritional approaches, a lot of what I've gone through, and then it has some really delicious recipes that you can try as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, listeners, this link will be on the email that we send out once this is released. And then thank you, Dr. Caplan, for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom that you've imparted to us. Listeners, this will be available for about 72 hours. So if you have heard it and you didn't take notes, you can do that the second time round once you listen to it, because it's quite important and life-changing nuggets that can really help you along your health journey. So that's it. I thank you for listening, and I thank Dr. Caplan once again. Dr. Brent, good luck in everything that you're doing. I think you guys are doing an amazing job and helping everybody around the world, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be invited on this summit. It's really an honor. Appreciate it.
Great. Cheers, everyone. Till next time.